All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Well, hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy Podcast. This, of course, is the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist perspective. And tonight, in honor of being 7 weeks in the hole, we're doing a movie in Spanish known as The Hole, but in American lingo, it is called The Platform, and it is a Netflix distributed and available movie that has a lot of, tropes of equality, socialism, communism, good stuff. It's going to be a real fun discussion tonight. Episode 181 of the show, actualanarchy.com/181. My co-host is Robert Johnson, and we check in with him every time to find out how things are on the entrepreneurial front. I hear there's some new regulations coming down the pike for you in the restauranteering. Restauranteering? Is that how you say that?
Sí, señor. Me llamo Roberto. Soy de FEMA Region 6. Me gusta escuchar la radio, ver televisión, cabrón. Y hay muchas regulaciones en el restaurante hoy de Governor Jay Inslee. Y él puede chingar el madre. Sí.
Wow, I hope that he's not bilingual. Otherwise, he might be a little bit offended by some of your diversity.
Qué triste, qué triste.
But the basics are, I think, that there's a new set of regulations that have just come out, and I'm sure you got it in an official letter that says something along the lines of you need to identify patrons and be able to contact trace or report on them, limit the number of people who can be in your restaurant. If there's any, altercation or other request of government, you're supposed to provide these records back to them so that they can quarantine people and do other nefarious things, which makes me not want to go to a restaurant ever again, by the way, at least not in this state.
Well, cabron, I don't know if there's going to be 100% compliance. I don't think. I mean, I got sent this yesterday, and stupid me, I didn't even think this was newsworthy. I was just like, yeah, this is just more tyranny from Inslee. But I didn't even think it was like worth sharing. I just read it and I was like, yeah, not going to do that. But yeah, just going over some of this crap. Hand sanitizer should be available at entry for all staff and patrons. Yeah, we're probably not going to do that. No bar seating. Well, we don't have a bar, but if we did, we'd suit people. If we do not offer table service, we must have protocols in place to ensure adequate social distancing at pickup stations. Yeah. I mean, this is just all ridiculous. It's like you have to limit tables. You have to scooch tables apart so that they're all apart from each other. You can't have guest occupancy no more than 50% building capacity, which would have to be lower if you're going to obey the social distancing crap. When measured from occupied chair to occupied chair to ensure the gun and chest seated at a table are at a minimum of 6 feet away. I mean, this is just strongly suggested customers wear a cloth face covering. Buffets and salad bars are not permitted. And then, like you said, if we offer a table service, create a daily log of all customers and maintain that log for 30 days, including telephone, email, contact information, and the time in that they were there. This will facilitate any contact tracing that might need to occur. So they're really getting set up for this contact tracing. There are some guidelines about you're just not going to be able to leave your home unless you have been tested. and you're all set up in their system to be tracked. It's really, the forced version of the social credit system, but it's just the authoritarian system. And these systems are always implemented for your own safety, your own benefit. It's always to help the children, the grandmas. It's never, we trust you to do the right thing, and you'll make your right choices for yourself, and everyone will decide for themselves whether or not they should visit this restaurant, if they deem it safe or not. It's we know what's best, and you will do it or else. But luckily, it's not really enforceable. They don't have the power or the authority to do any of this crap. This is all unconstitutional. I'm sure there are going to be a whole bunch of restaurants that will obey this crap and go along with it. But if you don't, what are they going to do? Really? They could make an example out of you.
Right.
They could absolutely do that, and that would be bad. But they can't police everybody.
Yeah, I was going to quote Lion King Scar when he says, "Is that a challenge?"
They can, but it's not like there's going to be some commissar, going into every restaurant every day and with a measuring tape. That's not a thing, especially not out here. Maybe in Seattle. And what you do is you make an example out of a few people in a high volume area, and then, through fear, the rest of the people will fall in line.
All right. Well, let's not give them any more ideas. All right. So let's get.
They don't need my ideas. They know this very well.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the last night's portion of the show. I'm sure we could talk about this for probably an hour easily, but we're here to ostensibly to talk about a movie, and we've got a guest, an amazing guest, who's been on a couple of times before, and we will get into that with our guest right after these messages.
See under.
Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Paul Johnson, The Last Nighters. And The Last Nighters can be found on the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. This is episode 124 of the show, and we're going to talk about the Netflix movie, The Platform. And we're going to descend into the Rawlsian nightmare, talking about lockdowns. As many people started getting on the higher floors and some started lower, the longer this goes on with the lack of production, the massive supply chain disruptions, the lower we will all get. So I'm relating this movie to present day. It's kind of the baseline of my discussion. You can find the show notes more at lastnighters.com/124. We have a guest, and we are apparently locked into Texas guests, apparently, because we had Rachel Kennerly of Candace Heals Me on last week, and we will be joining her for her episode on The Gentleman in a few weeks. So be on the lookout for that. But the other guest we have tonight is Scott Morrison, a.k.a. Captain A, who is also the great purveyor of the Facebook meme page, The Silence of the Memes. And I will defer to him to describe what that is. And welcome back to the show. You were on with us for Crazy Heart, for Enemy at the Gates, and also Joker. And you're with us tonight for The Platform. Welcome back to the show, Scott.
Hello. Hello. Yes, I was. Those were good movies. I need to watch The Joker again. I don't think I've seen that since we talked about it.
Yeah, it is a good one.
I'm certainly tired of watching this movie.
Well, tell me a little bit about your Facebook meme page. I've got it across the bottom here. People can find it at facebook.com/silence of the memes, no spaces.
Yep. Yeah. We all know politics can get a bit of a soul-crushing weight to it, and making memes forces me to find humor, but also you have to narrow down a very important point to a very short space, one line, and then to make it funny. And I like that challenge, so I've been making memes.
Well, that's good. You've been making memes for a while, and now you've got your own page about it, and I've enjoyed them. And you're right, they do get to the heart of whatever is in question, and it's a way to convey a whole lot of information in a very quick way. Mm-hmm. And I think memes are one of the I guess you could call it the information warfare. It's one of the quick deployment.
Yeah,
there.
they're really quick. If you can get them out there, and I've the original goal was to have a friend send me my own meme without knowing it's my own meme, and that actually happened really quickly. Like that was almost kind of shocking how fast that happened. But it's been really entertaining. I'm just waiting now to see the moment my dad sends me my own meme. That will be glorious.
That would be pretty good. All right. Well, thank you for coming back on the show. And we're going to be talking about the platform, and I'll get into the Google description here. This came out just last year, 2019. It's a sci-fi/horror film, 1 hour and 34 minutes. Can be found on Netflix, was distributed by Netflix, and has a 7 out of 10 on IMDb, 82% Rotten Tomatoes. And in a reversal from most movies, it actually has a lower percentage of people liking it from Google at only 77%. The description is very short. It says, in the future, prisoners housed in vertical cells watch as inmates in the upper cells are fed while those below starve. So not a whole lot to go on here, Robert, but this came out February 21st of this year, launched out in Taiwan. The director is Galder Gatsalua Uriarte. I'm totally butchering that.
Dude, your pronunciation is so spot on. It's
so
freaking me out right now.
So strong. And it's called El Hoyo in Spanish. The language is Spanish. And if you turn on the English dub and the English subtitles, they don't match. They don't line up. So it's very confusing. My wife and I like to watch shows and movies with the closed captioning on because we're old. And sometimes we can't always hear everything. And it was just way too... That was the horror I saw in this, was that those things didn't line up. So I had to turn off the closed captioning. But what's your take on the Google information, and what's your strong opening?
Well, that is terrifying, Daniel. Having the words not match up is, man, I can't even imagine living in that kind of nightmare.
It's like a level 6 problem. I'm at that.
Oh yeah, basically having to eat your wife to survive, basically. So anyway, I watched this movie in the original Espanol, and my 2 years of high school Spanish, let me tell you, came through. I understood way more than I thought I would. There's something about Spain Spanish, that is way more easy to understand. I guess the enunciation, the pronunciations, there's no the slang is probably, of course, different, but the way I learned it, we must have learned Spain Spanish as opposed to Mexico Spanish, because I can understand this way more than just like a couple of Mexicans talking. I have no idea what they're talking about, but this movie, I was like, man, I'm following along with what they're talking about. This is pretty amazing. I didn't understand all of them, the vocabulary. Of course, it's one of the first things to go, and but the verbs were almost all there still, and it was pretty cool. But anyway, this is it's like a 1-act play that's all set in the same place. That's kind of like the psychological horror character study movie. And for what it is, I think it's perfectly entertaining. As a commentary on the world, or like economics or anything like that, it's horrifically stupid, but I'm not surprised. I mean, there's like 0 movies that get economics right. Maybe Atlas Shrugged or something maybe gets it right, but all these lefty type movies, they have no concept. They have this fixed pie fallacy where the rich are eating up all the resources and there's nothing left for the poor people, and it's just really stupid. But I mean, if you just take it as a character study where these people are, going into for vague reasons, like some voluntarily, some not voluntarily. I'm not exactly sure if there's like contracts involved here, but it seems to be like you go in for a certain amount of time and then the main character is going to get a diploma of some kind at the end of it. He obviously thinks it's worth it, but I don't think that goes in with perfect understanding of how the building operates and what exactly is going to happen to him. So there seems to be some sort of bait and switch going on. But, if you just take it as a psychological horror character study movie, I think it's perfectly good.
All right. Well, not a bad open. I think I tend to agree with you in that if you just look at it as like a horror movie and for just like gross out stuff, it's perfectly entertaining and well done. But if you dig into any of the economics, you're right. It's got a lot of problems. I got a bunch of notes on this. It's not just the fixed pie fallacy. It's a whole host of problems. And the whole Rawlsian ideas, egalitarianism, the imposition of, was it spontaneous solidarity?
The spontaneous solidarity. They admit that communism can't work because they can't get everybody to go on board with I'll just take my share and pass it on.
Right.
I like that.
And we'll get into that because they do try to negotiate to get it, and then they try to use.
Then they have to use violence.
Violence, but also some more gross out factor as a threat.
I don't remember that part. Gross out factor. What?
Oh yeah.
Share the food, or I'm going to poop on the food.
I will shit all over the food. You can't shit
yeah,
upwards.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that gets the results a little quicker than the nice asking anyway. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and I got a ton of notes on this, so we might have a kind of a long show tonight. But let's go to you, Scott. What's your take on the opening information that Robert has provided, and any of the very short Google information?
No, that was good. I guess because I always try and come into this looking for something to talk about, it ends up taking away from the fact that it's still just a movie. So yeah, as a horror film, it makes me want to watch something called Midnight Madness. So I kept seeing that film get associated with it as, I guess, a certain level of horror film. I'll give it credit for that. But some of the lines, I guess, because I also am a closed caption individual for my hearing impairment. I was reading it. I had it on the English subtitles, and it is totally off. But just you read the line, and when you read it, it's so much harder to ignore the stupidity behind whatever they're saying. So I got stuck in the economics of what they were trying to poke at. That bothered me.
So we had spontaneous solidarity, you and me, Scott, we both, though thousands or 2,000 miles apart, we both were bothered by the incongruent captions with the English dubbing.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I've got it on right now with closed captioning, and even the timing of the timing of when they're speaking doesn't line up. And you're just like, I know that's not what they said. So I do wonder how much I missed just off translation, if it makes a big difference.
My high school Spanish classes pay off once again.
Oh, man, mine did not.
All right, Robert, so I wanted to direct a question to you. Now, I think when we were kids, you had maybe floated an idea of a similar one-act kind of play. I don't know if it was cubes or cells or something like that. And you talked about having people kind of unsure of who else was in the room with them and having to discover something about them or figure out how to escape. Does this ring a bell at all? Is this at all familiar to you?
This is definitely something I haven't thought about in 20 years. I think I remember us talking about this. This might have been an idea I had a long time ago, but I cannot provide any additional details at this time. This is something you might have warned me ahead of time, and then I could maybe pull something out of my memory. But no, I want to say it was kind of like a Saw film in a sense, before Saw films were a thing,
right?
But I don't remember.
Okay, well, good enough. I mean.
Good content.
I watched this and I was like, wow, this is something that I vaguely recall Robert talking about in that little house behind your house. You know, we would hang out there and eat tortilla chips and salsa and play WWF on the Nintendo. Remember those nights?
See, you got totally different memories of us growing up. I've got one set of memories, and you got the other set of memories. So together we make one person.
We Voltron together.
Yeah.
And make one whole memory. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that people love this content on this episode 124 of the show, lastnighters.com/124. Also find the pre-show and post-show bonus content over on our Patreon page, patreon.com/ what is it? Last Nighters? Something like that. No, it's lastnighters.com/Patreon. That's it. Jeez. See, I need you to pick up where my memory is faulty.
You're always the man on the spot with that, though. Anyway.
Yeah. So I opened with this whole Rawlsian idea, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rawls, but he was like a philosophical social theorist who's leaned on pretty heavily by a lot of people making social policy. And he has this concept of an original position. It's like a thought exercise where if you were in a veil of ignorance and you didn't know what level of society you would be born into, what kind of society would you want to be born into? And so without knowing whether you'd be in the lower classes or higher classes or middle class, what would you choose without foreknowledge? And his argument is that, well, you would obviously be risk averse and want to have at least some minimum standard level of survival. You'd want some level of comfort, some amount of food, some form of shelter. And so you would want to have that kind of society basically imposed upon everybody by whatever social structure or governmental structure is in place. And I'm sort of paraphrasing this, and Tom Woods has a really good episode, his episode 445. You can find that at tomwoods.com/445, where he goes into this whole idea. But in watching this movie with these platforms, and every month you move from one floor to another, and as the food descends, people are eating as much as they want, and then it moves down, and eventually you run out of food, obviously. So it sort of sounded a lot like Rawls, in that if you didn't know you're going to be on floor 100 or floor 10, what kind of society would you want in this platform structure, in this vertical structure? Would you want it to be sort of imposed on everybody, that they can just have a certain amount of ration and then make a plate for the next person going down? Or would you want to get as much as you could as while it was available? And then, this fixed pie fallacy that you talked about earlier, where there is no production going on. There's only just an amount of stuff. There's no question as to where that came from. And as it goes further and further down into the platform, there's less and less available. And eventually you get down to the point where there's cannibals. And appropriately enough, Silence of the Memes. Scott, you're the guest. That's your website, and we're talking about a movie that features some cannibalism, Hannibal Lecter style. But so TomWoods.com/445 talks about Rawls, and basically totally ignores property rights, but then assigns them at a certain point. So, like, if you didn't know what you'd be born into or what level you'd be on, you would want to have a certain kind of society around you. Do you guys recall anything about Rawls, or am I barking up kind of a random tree here?
No, I'm fairly familiar with Rawls. From what I understand, he's the guy that argued that life is normally brutal and short, and therefore we need violence and force to keep everybody in line, or else it would just be this dog-eat-dog world.
No, that's Hobbes. But
I'm getting it wrong. Sorry.
There's some Hobbesianism in this as well, obviously, as you get further and further down in the platform, and they say that there's no consequences. You can do whatever you want. People do get into this more primitive way of behaving, eating like animals, fighting over scraps, becoming violent. There's even a scene where when the first guy who he rooms with in room 33, which might have some Masonic or some religious undertones, which Scott, you and I had talked about a little bit via Messenger. But when they move to a very low level, our hero, and I don't recall his name at the moment, but the other guy ties him to a bed, Bush Doctrine style, like preemptive strike, and threatens to, basically says, hey, here's how it's going to be. We're not going to get any food down at this level. We're on, level 150 or 170 or whatever. No food will get down here. So in order for us to both survive, and because you're stronger than I'm going to hold you down, tie you down, and then I'm going to harvest meat from you and keep us both alive for the month. Cannibal style. And he's going to feed him his own self, sort of also Hannibal Lecter style. What do you think of that bargain there, Robert? It's basically because there's no other supplies coming in. It's really...
How is it a bargain, though? He has no choice of the matter. What are you talking about? A bargain?
It's a bargain, but it is a solution. And honestly, I can't really think of many other solutions other than maybe they just both volunteer to eat some of each other.
Well, as I recall, the main character is like, well, I can survive a month without food. But the old guy's like, well, I can't. I'm an old guy, and therefore I'm going to eat you. That's his justification. So it's not like the other guy would have to eat each other and like, we're going to eat a little bit of each other and we're going to somehow survive. It's no, I have to eat you in order to survive, and you have no choice in the matter.
Okay, right. Because you can survive for, well, they always say it's like 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. But I think there's some variability in there. I think water, you can go maybe up to a week, though I wouldn't recommend it. Food,
yeah, I mean, I've gone on fast before, and if you're just sitting around, I think it's a lot easier than if you're actually having to get up and perform labor or go around hunting for food or anything like that. If you are just laying in bed, I'm sure you could survive for 30 days without it, assuming you have a decent amount of stored body fat. If you're super thin, maybe you might have some more problems. I mean, you're going to start eating into your muscles, but I think you'll still live. Your liver definitely still has a stored amount of vitamins and minerals. So you're not going to, get scurvy right away or anything like that.
All right, and this is not medical advice. We're just critiquing a film here.
Well, what kind of medical advice would that be, Daniel?
Well, we're
go ahead and starve yourself for 30 days. No worries.
No worries.
You'll be fine, guys. You'll be
Dr.
fine.
Robert, MD, right here.
I tried it one time over spring break. It worked out great.
So really, I guess if they were in this situation for longer, then the principle would kind of then become a thing. Like how would you handle it if it was a longer period of time, then someone could survive without food? Would it change your answer?
If you could not survive, then I don't see there being any kind of fair or economical. Is that a right word? I'm totally making shit up.
Sounded nice.
Thank you very much. I don't think that there's any kind of fair contract that's going to be formed. I mean, first of all, you're forced, you're stuck in this place. So any kind of contracts these people come up with, they're all under basically coercion. If they entered into this building with the assumption of one thing, and then he got in there and it was totally other thing, that's a bait and switch. That was entered into through fraud. And then any kind of voluntary associations that the prisoners essentially come into, well, they're all basically under coercion. So I don't know if any of them are necessarily NAP violations or enforceable or anything like that. If one guy voluntarily cuts his leg off and said, I'll give you my leg and then I'll eat your leg. Okay. I don't think that there's any kind of imposition required. Any kind of like, I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say here, Daniel.
Basically, it's Snowpiercer, but in a vertical stack instead of a horizontal stack. Because like in the back of the bus in Snowpiercer, they were like eating each other's limbs and stuff. They're volunteering them, I think, to keep people alive.
Yeah, and in other movies, there's been like lotteries and stuff. They've kind of explored this theme before.
Well, the scene that's on right now is the woman when she's confessing that she didn't know what she was sending people to. So it makes you wonder if they had actually shown that moment when they were filling out the contract and explained what was written in it. Sorry. Would it have suddenly exposed the whole thing as a sham?
Well, it makes me think that there's obviously not everything's written in the contract. Like, I don't understand why these people are voluntarily going into this building, not understanding what's going to be in there.
Yeah, it
I mean,
seemed like he was maybe going there because he wanted to go to a monastery type retreat where he could just focus on reading this book or quit smoking or whatever he was trying to do. Like he was trying to isolate himself to force himself to like kick smoking and then read this book, and he's going to come out of it with a degree. So it's actually a much faster method than the current progressive academic system, because it'd only take him 6 months to get his degree instead of like 6 years. They're called doctors.
Right. This reminds me of like the Stanford prison experiment, right? Which is like so unethical that they couldn't ever do it again.
They couldn't. They had to shut it down early because people were adopting their roles a little too aggressively,
too enthusiastically, beating the crap out of people.
Yeah, I think there's actually a movie about that, so maybe we can look into that sometime. But that was, I think, the guy Philip Zimbardo was the professor who handled that, and he assigned people like you're a prison guard or you're a prisoner based on some random selection thing like eye color or what color shirt they were wearing that day or something like that. And it was very quick for people to adopt sort of these innate, due to the level of authority that they were given, to be either sadistic, or if they were assigned prisoner, then they were much more like meek or docile or like reserved, like they deserved it, like they assumed their role, that became part of their identity, and very, very rapidly.
Wait, but didn't we learn that the Stanford prison experiment was actually a fraud?
What do you mean by fraud? Like it never happened?
No. It happened, but what we saw was manipulated. Hang on,
the
I'm trying
results
to look it
were
up.
fake?
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up.
It's possible. I've also heard something about the Milgram experiments that also were questionable.
There's more evidence that the guards knew the results that Zimbardi wanted to produce and were trained to meet his goals. It also provides evidence that the conclusion of the experiment was predetermined. That's from the American Psychology Association.
That would render the results useless.
But perhaps a stunt, have it fail spectacularly to garner attention. I mean, we're still talking about it today, and from what I understand, it got shut down early because it was such a spectacular failure.
Right. Well, I mean, it would also explain kind of the reason why we saw them go so extreme, because if you know that's the result you want, then there's no harm in producing it. Go to that level.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe you might have felt a little guilty and not done that, not tried to be such a monster to them.
Well, Daniel, let me ask you this question.
Sir,
assuming that the contracts are all contain everything that's in there, and all these people are entering in voluntarily, and this was like a formal experiment done to study human behavior or something like that, and all the the food situation and the random placement and everything was going to be explained to all these people going in, and everybody did so voluntarily, would you say that the creators, the ones that knew everything, acted immorally in any way?
And are you talking about specifically as related to this movie or the Stanford prison study?
I'm talking about this movie, Daniel.
I don't really think that you can actually ever have perfect knowledge about anything, but it does seem as though it was misrepresented, but not by the person in particular who was like interviewing him and providing the intake form, because she didn't seem to be aware of it either. She was in a compartmentalized position where she was only privy to what was within her purview.
I understand. As per the movie, none of what I said is true, but I'm asking a hypothetical here. If the contracts explained everything, like this is the nature of the food coming down, there's going to be random placement in the levels. I'll leave it up to you to decide what's going to happen, but imagine where you're going to be a month without food if everybody above you eats all the food. That kind of thing. It's all explained.
So you're doing the Rawlsian thought experiment, basically. Like, all right, so coming into this situation, you don't know what floor you're going to be on and what floor you're going to move to next for however many months you're in here. Every month you're going to be on a new floor. And
Right.
here's
If you set that up and everybody voluntarily joins, understand it as best as an adult can understand a thing, and sets it up, are you, as the game master study writer guy, are you doing anything immoral?
Well, I can't imagine anyone would sign up for it, but if people, as best as possible, understood what was going to happen, and you explained it all ahead of time, you show them this movie, and you're like, "Hey, here's what we're doing. here's a film depiction of what might happen based on these things that we've put in place, these motions we put in place, and these factors that you're going to have to navigate through." I guess you've informed them as best as possible, and maybe you've got some S&M type people who are like into it, cannibals.
Well, there are, because remember that, I don't remember the name of the guy, but there's been people like, come eat me on Craigslist, right? And the guy came and ate the guy, right? And then the guy died. And because the guy ate him, like ate his heart or whatever, ate his bits, his important parts, and it was all done voluntarily. But I want to be eaten, and you are a cannibal, and you want to eat somebody, and we're both getting what we want. And I don't remember if anything like criminally happened to the guy that ate the guy, but it seems like a voluntary situation, Daniel. And what if you own your own body? I guess we could get together and you could eat me, and that seems like something I could do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's illegal, but legality doesn't really matter a whole lot. I mean, I guess if it's voluntary, I guess you could do it, though it wouldn't be like a natural thing where like you're satisfying a desire and growing and living a full life and all this. It's like a kind of a demented fucking thing, but I mean, I guess you could do it. I mean, if everyone's willing.
Well, it happened, Daniel.
Yeah,
it happened. That's not even hypothetical. That actually happened.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if there's depraved enough people, I mean, I guess, I guess the question is, what would anyone even do to stop it? And would they have a right to stop it?
And would you feel justified in stopping it?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, that one's tough.
I wouldn't be hanging around those people, probably.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, the one guy's
I
going
would
to be
pretend
dead
it doesn't
pretty
happen.
soon, so you don't have to worry about that. But
yeah,
Anyway.
I think some social ostracism would probably occur to the guy who ate the other guy on request.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm not going to be running in circles with that dude. But anyway, let's move on to another kind of trope that they pull out here, and that's the guy who buys the sharpener system because they advertise it on TV, and we're all mindless Galbraithian drones who buy whatever is marketed to us.
And he was duped.
Yeah, we're duped into buying things because of advertising and all this. And then of course, it's almost a planned obsolescence thing, because the next day after you buy it, then they come out with some new thing that's even better that totally obsoletes the thing you just bought, because now you don't even need to sharpen your knife. Now it self-sharpens. So he just wasted all his money on a sharpening tool that was like so amazing and talked up, hyped up, and he bought it because he's mindless and not able to choose what he's going to buy. So
yeah, it's like all those morons that bought the iPhone 9 when the iPhone 10's coming, you morons.
That's right. Yeah. And so now he's got this Forever Sharp knife, and I guess he bought that too. And I forget exactly why he's in jail. Oh yeah, he threw a TV out because he was so incensed, so angry that they duped him into buying the one thing and then came out with something even better that he also bought, which is pretty ridiculous. So this whole planned obsolescence thing and the whole we're just mindless consumer zombies who are at the whim of advertisers. The whole Galbraithian argument. You want to just tackle that for a moment there, Robert, because it's another fallacious argument from one of our betters.
Yeah, it's real dumb. I mean, it just stomps all over self-ownership. Like we're adults that can't decide for ourselves what our desires and what we want to have satisfy them. It's like we're just brainless automatons that can be programmed at will. If that's true, then all advertising would work equally. Like I would just be constantly buying everything. to the point where I'm just like penniless, right? I mean, if that advertising has all this power over me and I can't discern one product from another, then why am I not just surrounded hoarder style in every single last thing that's ever been advertised?
And some people are. I mean, some people are hoarders, and some people are, compulsive shoppers and all of this. And I guess people look at that and be like, well, yeah, Galbraith's got a point.
So they're victims.
Yeah, they're victims. They're victims
It's not their
of
fault.
consumerism and this throwaway culture. But really, I mean, advertising serves a very, very useful purpose, and it makes you aware of things that are out there in the world that can satisfy your wants, needs, and desires that you may not even be aware of. You may see something that it occurs to you as you see it, like, oh, that's going to solve this problem I've been having. So advertising is a very, very important thing. It's a very important function that conveys information back out to people, to consumers, to be able to know what's even available to them. And it helps kind of this virtuous circle of as people buy it, more and better and cheaper versions, more efficient versions will then be created. So, I don't.
Yeah, go ahead. The early adopters for the first version of a thing allow and provide the capital for subsequent versions that are improved upon, and the price gets down as the manufacturers figure out how to make this thing better and better and cheaper,
and compete with each other.
And then pretty soon it's cheap enough for everybody to have one. I mean, everybody's got a phone. These things are amazing. I mean, 20 years ago, if you waved one of these things around, it'd be like, what the hell is that?
It's Gandalf. He's a wizard. All right. So that kind of tackles that one a little bit. And I've got a Rothbard lecture series that goes into advertising and calls Galbraith to the carpet in a pretty funny way. So I'll post that on our show notes page. And the whole lecture series is actually really good because it opens with Rothbard being hopping mad about price controls and price gouging. And this is early 70s when Nixon was putting in price controls. And we're seeing a lot of kind of similar destruction in the structure of production right now with the pandemic and the overreaction to it. I'm not saying that the virus isn't a bad thing. What I'm saying is that there's probably a whole lot of overcorrection happening or overcautiousness happening.
What? Central planning isn't working out, Daniel? What are you talking about?
Not working out so good. So I think that this would be a very good lecture series to check out and also take apart the advertising from Galbraithian critique. Now, one of the next things I wanted to talk about was when he says to the lady, you want to ration the food? What are you, a communist? And I thought at that time, price gouging would probably solve the situation here, because if you made it cost something for those people at the upper levels, then they would only consume what they actually need versus as much as they can get or as much as they want. So they can kind of be gluttonous because they have this like bounty afforded to them. And so there is no real work happening here. It is just like a prison. There's no like production happening. There's nobody putting anything out for exchange and to grow the food stores that are coming down. It's all just kind of descending from heaven or the heaven of this platform thing. But if they allowed price gouging, then it would have given a better allocation of the limited supply of resources. The scarcity would have gotten further down into the platform.
Well, any pricing whatsoever, if there's any kind of currency or any kind of economy at all that happened, and you had it like a vending machine came down, then yeah, and the snails were $1,000, and you even just got some kind of stipend every month or something, and you had to make your choices that way. That way you could maybe one day splurge on the lobster, and then the rest of the time you're eating like rice cakes or something. But yeah, any kind of price system at all would allow for a far more spread out distribution of the goods, even though they only seemed to have like 30 seconds or a minute to eat as much as they could. It didn't seem like it was very long.
Yeah, it did seem to go pretty quickly. But and I didn't understand the whole premise of if we send back some of the food, it gets all the way to the bottom and then comes back up and there's one undisturbed dish.
Solidarity, Daniel.
What does that even...
It's a rate fist.
It's a raised fist. Like it's some bit of information coming back to the people at the top, but they're just compartmentalized cooks or cleaning people or whatever. Like, what are they going to do? They're not going to care.
Yeah, the end of the movie should be just a janitor that comes along and pushes a broom and dumps the little girl into a big dumpster.
Yeah.
And
Just sweeps it off.
Well, and the ending of this ascending girl who's under the youngest age that's supposed to be in there. I think the one lady says 16. So I guess the point is that it's going to blow wide open the fact that they're not following their own rules. It's like unconstitutional. It's like, who cares? Nobody follows the Constitution. They just pay lip service to it when they can beat the other side over the head with it. That's all the Constitution is for these days.
The whole thing with the girl was that we're going to send a child up to do better than we did. She's ascending. We're teaching her how to do better. That's why they walk away. They use the little child as if the future is always in the children. Teach them to do better than what we did. Because think, to get down all the way to that point, to realize it, they had to kill how many people? So it would be better than us. It's creepy.
Well, yeah, it definitely seems like she's a message to the people in charge. I don't know if she could explain to the people above just exactly what kind of horrors are going on, because there's no windows, right? They're not being observed in any way. Well, except that there's food. They know somehow if there's like food in your pocket or in your hand.
Well, how do you even survive at that point? I mean, she was on level 333 when they found her.
Yeah,
like, how long have you been down there?
Yeah, she should have been dead.
Is she surviving because the lady goes down every month and brings her flesh of some other person? Like, is that how she's keeping the kid alive? Otherwise, how are they getting any food?
Well, I think she kept looking for her and was unable to find her. And every once in a while, she would, drop down to the next level, and then she'd get assaulted or detained for a few days and raped for a few days or whatever before then she could continue on. But then after that month, she would just end up on some other random floor and have to start all over again.
Yeah, really, this movie should have had like a little cubby, like Aliens, Newt style, where she had like some box of crackers and some things keeping her alive. Because, I didn't understand how she was still alive down at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. And healthy, because it's not like she madly stuffed her face with that cake. She just ate it casually, like she'd been eating the whole time.
Well, she might have been just gotten to that floor. She might have been on a higher floor the month prior and had food available to her. And then she ended up on this level 333, because it wasn't very long after our hero and the other dude who ends up going down with him and defending the food all the way down. I think it was in the early days of that month.
So you got the wait. So Daniel, you got the sense that the little girl was somebody's roommate every month, and it was just now that she was all alone.
Yeah.
That is not the impression I got at all. Like, who? If she's been searching, she goes down every week or every day looking for this kid, she would have found her.
Yeah.
No, but there's so many, and she gets delayed. She only has a month. She only has 30 days to try to get all the way through. And every once in a while, she gets detained, caught on level for a few days at a time.
Our heroes go down in one day.
Yeah, because there's two of them with weapons. And that one
she's a badass killer lady, ninja lady.
She has the knife. She gets the knife, kills the guy right below.
Loose.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but she hasn't achieved her goal yet. So she's been trying, but she hasn't achieved it.
I think you're a
I would have to imagine,
apologist at this point, Daniel.
Well, the old man knows her at the beginning. The old man calls out what she's doing. So she's been around, and the old man's been around a long time. So you'd have to think that at some point in time, she was able to make it all the way down to the bottom.
Well, they keep shuffling the deck. And if she gets delayed every couple of floors or whatever, there's only so many times she can get delayed before she only gets so far before she gets reshuffled. And what if the girl's above her?
Yeah, she can only go below, but if the people are getting shuffled around all the time, word would get out. Like, hey, there's a kid here. I mean,
Maybe.
information's still going to get shared. You go to a prison today, everybody knows everything about everybody's business because that's all there is to do is talk. That's one of the big freaking unrealistic things about this movie is that the people above and below weren't having conversations. They were just like, fuck you, asshole, and no, fuck you, and fuck you. It would be like, oh, hey, Bob, how's it going up there? Yeah, oh, pretty good. This week I got some food this time, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
And the old man's still under the impression there's no kids.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Robert. I think that really there would be a whole lot of communication going on. They'd be passing messages, telephone style, all the way up and down the column and all this. But there was this social structure in place where people were very, it was almost like in high school, like, well, maybe not high school, but like junior high or younger, where if a kid was a grade or two above you, you didn't talk to them. And if they were a grade or two below you, you didn't talk to them. And so that was kind of like what was going on here, because they had this like class warfare thing going on, and there were apparently 333 classes of people. And if there were even one level above you, they're going to piss on you, spit on you, poop on your food, whatever, poop on your face, which I think was a hate crime, by the way, because it was the black guy trying to climb up and then the lady poops on him. It was terrible. But then they can't talk to the people below them because they're beneath them, like literally. And so much so that
Temporarily.
Right, temporarily. And so that's why it doesn't make any sense.
That's right. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense, but it's like part of this world, right? And so because it's part of the premise of this world, this world of envy and very hard classes where if they're above you, they're way better than you. And if they're below,
but
they're dog shit.
if they had never shuffled around and they were just stuck on your floor and you got the feeling that the people above you felt better than you and the people below you really were beneath you, and like you began to believe that they were there for a reason and that you're there for a reason and they're up there for a reason, then I can see why there would be some kind of like, hey, fuck you down there, asshole, and oh, fuck you up there. But since they got shuffled around all there is always random, I don't really think that would set in. So that part made no sense to me.
Right, yeah, and I totally see what you're saying, that because it's random, you would think that they would understand that it's random, and like in the Rawlsian experiment, you could be up there next time and way down below the other time, so you might as well treat people with some dignity and respect. But they were very slavish to this idea of whoever's above me is better than me and not going to talk to me, and whoever's below me is a piece of shit, and I can treat him as bad as I want.
Well, maybe this movie's trying to tell us that people are just easily programmed by advertising and also by placement, current placement. Wherever they are now, they have no memory of a month ago, and they have no sense of the future. It's just whatever is happening right now is the way it is and the way it's always been.
Yeah, shitload of people bought Samurai Plus after this film.
Yeah, self-sharpening knife. I could use one of those.
So let's talk about the spontaneous order and why that doesn't work. And
All
how
right.
the movie, it doesn't even work in the movie. And I think it's kind of an admission, right? That communism can't work. Because the lady is trying to get everybody to agree to only eat whatever their ration is. And people are like, no, I'm in it for my own self-interest. So in the sense,
last month I was starving.
yeah. So communism ignores humans' own self-interest. I think the movie makes it perfectly clear that it wouldn't work.
There's no room for it. Or that the only way to enforce the equality that they are desiring is violence.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one woman is like telling people to eat their portions and then create 2 portions for the people below them and just pass it on in this sort of like kumbaya, pay it forward kind of thing. But the guys that she's telling this to just ignore her, tell her off and all this stuff. And eventually our hero is like, do it or I'll shit on your food. And she's like amazed. And how can she get the people above him to do it? And he goes, well, I can't shit upwards. But it's sort of like if you have the capacity to have a not a legitimate, but a credible threat, then that can earn some respect or garner some respect for what you're asking for, because you can follow through on what you're saying you will do if they don't do what you want. You kind of follow what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, if you're just talking at your ass and claiming that you're going to shit on their food even though they're above you, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so you can't. And I'm not saying it's like the best negotiation tactic, but the other method of negotiation wasn't working. and so he had to like try something else, and it ended up working at least a little bit initially.
Right, but then ultimately their communism is enforced through violence.
Yeah, or threats of like defiling your food, because the
No, actual violence when the two of
Mhm.
them go down and
Yeah.
start beating the crap out of everybody, and they only get to like floor 50, and then they start distributing food to
Right,
each
and it
person
sort of makes
ration.
their argument sort of makes sense. Like, well, people on the first 50 or so floors, they eat every day, so it's sort of a minor inconvenience for them to miss out on a ration one day.
Mhm.
Now that sort of ignores the whole subjective value thing, and the you can't cross compare subjective values amongst people, but it sort of has on its face a credible concept, because the people on the lower floors are getting no food at all, and the argument is that there's enough food on this initial table that comes down for everyone to get enough to at least survive on. It's just a matter of
But
the distribution problem.
right, but as they learn, they don't know how many people there are.
Right. Yeah, they don't know how far it
So
goes.
they don't know what the ration is, the equal ration is for each person. They're
Well,
just guessing.
see, and I took that as
It's central
are they
planning at its
saying-
finest, that they don't even know the numbers.
Well, but it's even were they saying if you just eat what you asked for? He only asked for the snails. So does that mean every time the platform came down, if he just ate his snails, then he'd be fine? And then they imply, obviously, that everybody would get what they needed. And it's like, well, what if you're the person that asked for the bottle of wine? You're never actually going to get anything. You're just
Right, and that's part of that bait and switch, because the question isn't what are you willing to eat every day you're in here.
mhm.
It's what's your favorite food.
Right.
You can eat, or what's your favorite thing to have, wine or escargot, whatever. But they're using that answer, and that reminds me of like the census and other statistical measurements the government tries to use to divine what to do.
Survey.
Yeah,
and
some
that-
survey. Because they're going to take some information that you provided at one static point in time and use that for some other longer period of time before they can implement whatever solution they're trying to do. And by that time, their data is obsolete, totally irrelevant, or they're going to misconstrue it.
Or their own actions create distortions in the market that change the nature of the market in the first place, that created the conditions in the beginning.
And this is relevant because I just actually completed my census online.
Daniel,
I didn't want someone showing up.
you bootlicker.
I didn't want someone harassing me. So what I did, here's a.
Did you say that Spider-Man lives with you?
This is worth all of your Patreon dollars, everyone. lastnighters.com/Patreon. What you can do on the online is you can give them just the information that's constitutionally required or authorized for them to ask for. They'll say other things are required, and they'll give you an error message if you don't fill them out. But if you just hit submit again, it'll take you to the next question. So there are like 3 or 4 questions that you are supposedly legal required to respond to. Now, I think that's of course bullshit. But if they're going to claim that these are the rules, then they can't really come after you if you give them that bare minimum. So I think it's the number of people in the house, your name and contact information, and whether you live at the address, something like that. Those are the required things. Number of people live in the house, a legitimate, like address, and that's it. All the other questions, you don't have to answer. They'll say you do, but you actually don't. So I ended up answering like 3 questions, and I did not fill in the other 30 or whatever, and just clicked submit, and then it errored, and then click submit again, and just got all the way through to where it said you've completed your census. Print this page to confirm that you've done it. So if they ever come back,
the Gestapo.
you didn't give me enough information, I'll be like, well, I got this thing that says I did. So there you go. But anyway,
Take it to the man, Daniel.
That's right.
Mhm.
But Rothbard has a really good take on what he would do with the statistic takers. He would blind the state. Why give them any information with which they can pretend to know what to do, to where to devote resources? He would blind the state, not give them this information that they can pretend to allocate resources to something, because it's as soon as you collect that data, it's already out of date.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway.
Just got to the scene with the girl eating the cake. She looks so healthy.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really starve a kid just to make a movie, but I
Yeah.
know what you mean.
Although I don't know, man. Man, some of these movies as of late have really started breaking that the child rule where you can't kill a child on a movie scene. You
Mm.
ever remember that rule? It was like an unspoken kind of thing where for the
Is
longest
that like
time,
you
like
can't kill a dog.
if a kid was gonna die, you couldn't show the scene. And like recently there was some Nazi movie that was on and they just straight shot the kid right in the head and you're just like, oh, well,
Wow.
okay.
Damn.
Yeah, well, the lead actor in this, apparently he lost, I don't know, 30, 40 pounds during the shoot, so that they sort of shot it chronologically. So early on, he's, his normal figure or whatever. Is that the right word? Is that right?
Yeah,
Is-
you're admiring a man's figure. Yes, that's the right word.
Normal proportions.
Healthy, thick.
But by the end, he's very gaunt and very thin. He kind of pulls that Christian Bale thing. He did The Machinist, that movie famously, where he got like super, super thin. Then he got super buff and ripped for Batman. And Robert Pattinson just came out and said that he's not going to work out to be Batman. He's going to be, I'm Beta Man. He's not going to work.
Well, isn't he playing like a young Batman though? So maybe you can get away with that.
He is,
I don't know.
I think, but and yeah, he could probably get away with it. But he's standing on this platform of smashing the patriarchy to do it.
Oh God.
So it's a virtue signal, basically.
Gross.
Well, here's the other thing about them going down and protecting the food, defending it as they're going down, being willing to, and able to defend the food does actually get some of the food down to the lower level. So they have the capacity to defend and the capacity to negotiate from a position of strength as they're going down with people. And then if people aggress against them, and actually this is a good question for you, Robert. Are they actually defending, or are they, because the other people have sort of in a riparian water allocation model of the flow from a river, like people upstream have acquired homesteaded a certain amount, and as people move further and further down, they've homesteaded their amount. Have the people on the upper floors homesteaded, having a certain amount of food allocated to them, and then these guys standing on this platform with weapons saying, no, don't touch the food. If you do, we're going to kill you.
Well, have they acquired it justly?
The people who are used to being on floor 12 and getting the floor 12 amount of food, I mean...
Used to? What are you talking about? It's 1 month. Everybody's swapping around every month.
Right. But if they're on floor 12 now, and they're on floor 12 for a couple of weeks, they've gotten used to it, right? They've homesteaded the floor 12 amount of food.
Homesteading the floor 12 amount of food. Okay, go ahead.
So are the guys now defending that floor, or the food as it descends down? Are they being defensive, or are they being the aggressor as they're going down? Because they're preventing the people from getting the amount of food that they had been homesteading for the last, however many days that they've been on that floor.
Well, they're definitely making a property claim, right? They're saying that this is the food that belongs to people below us, and then we're defending it. Or at least that it belongs to us, and then we're going to distribute it to people below us. I tend to agree with you in the sense that they're taking it from somebody who's expecting it, but it's not theirs. Just because you expect a thing doesn't mean you own a thing. Like, you're expecting a handout from somebody every week. Well, you don't get it 1 week. Did they rob it from you? No. It wasn't yours in the first place. It's like when people make the argument that you downloaded a song and then you're stealing out of the hands of the musician, Scott. Scott doesn't actually own future sales. So he might have been expecting a sale, but he doesn't own that future sale. So nobody actually stole it from him. So I tend to think that even though they expected it, they didn't own that food. So I mean, nobody's nobody's a great actor in this situation. I can't necessarily
Well,
put
I mean, the old man
more
says it.
blame on one person than another, but
The old man says it. I mean, when the heat and the temperature changes, you don't own the food, throw it back. So it's for floor 12 to stake a claim to something. It wouldn't make any sense. It's not theirs.
Well, Scott, here's a question that's kind of related. Do you think that it makes sense that the movie seems to be arguing that people in their own little bubble aren't going to look at the bigger picture? Like, there's who knows how many floors on here. It ends up being 333. So because people don't have the information and don't know that there's a bunch more people below them that aren't going to get food if they take more than they, quote unquote, need, is the movie making this argument that if people knew, then they would act differently, they would behave differently, or that if there's somebody was righteous enough to impose upon everyone, conveying this information and perhaps through threats of violence to get the food all the way down to the bottom, that they're seeing the bigger picture. And it's sort of analogous to like a climate change crisis where individual actors may not be aware of how much harm they're causing. But if you get, a little Swedish girl saying, "How dare you," to galvanize everybody into voting for impoverishment and probably the deaths of hundreds of millions of people who are living on the margins, that is the solution, the catalyst, the spontaneous unity, bottom unity, whatever the commie jargon is, that will get those things accomplished on a collective, greater good level. Scott.
Oh man, you're gonna have to repeat the first part of your question.
Oh man, I'm gonna remember that.
What? You started.
I guess that the argument is that because people are all in their little bubbles on their individual floors, they're going to only be looking out for their individual selves. But if they were aware of the greater good argument, that would be better for everybody.
Well, I mean, even if they are aware of it, it seems like they try to tell that. And the first person we encounter is somebody who's been there, so he knows that there's people far above him and far below him. And he still doesn't care, and it becomes boiling down to the idea of they don't know where they're going to be the next month. And if you don't know where you're going to be, then this might be the only time you get to eat. And so you better get your stomach full. But it's just silly because it's not. It's back to the fixed pie thing. That's not how it would be out in reality, in the sense that the plate is always there as long as you're willing to go put the work in to get it and do what's necessary to put the food on your plate.
Yeah, I think whether this movie realizes it or not, the real message that it's conveying is the tragedy of the commons. There is no individual private property ownership of any of this food. There's no price system. It's all like collectively owned food. So nobody knows, what's yours and what's his and what's whatever. It's just all commonly used, and it gets trashed and destroyed. And some people use it more than others, and other people get screwed.
Yeah. Oh no, man, dude, the deer leases were the same way before my dad ever bought his ranch out in West Texas. Whenever we were on deer leases, the fact that you did not know the next year if the owner of the land was going to continue leasing out the property or if he was going to lease it to somebody else because he's got a buddy he wants to help out. You didn't know that. So you took everything you could. You got a tag for 6 deer total. You took all 6 deer. It didn't matter. But now that I'm in control of the property and I've got to worry about what's on my property, do I really want to shoot that deer this time? Or do I want to wait for it to grow up next year? And I'm far more conservative about what is my plate and what I'm willing to take from it, rather than just depleting my resources because I'm mad hungry and I don't know if next year I'm going to get to do it again.
No, this is actually a great insight, Robert, because you're right. It is a tragedy of the common situation, and it's the lack of property rights that eliminates the whole concept of conserving any of this, because people are going to get what they can because it's there, because they don't know how much needs to go down and if they're going to get more next time or whatever. So yeah, it's getting as much as possible to deplete the resources as rapidly as possible, and it's the worst possible way of managing any scarce resource.
Mhm.
Absolutely. No, it reminds me of when we did Dance with the Wolves, right? And they had those white hunters or whatever. They went and shot all those buffaloes, and there wasn't any buffaloes for the natives, and everybody was sad.
Yeah, hey, that's a good segue, and then we're gonna have to start winding this down. We're already long, but this segue is about the two dudes who, when they're on level 6, they say only a lunatic gives up level 6, and the guy responds, "Well, we're just two dudes just going for it." Is this them using their position of privilege to help those with less privilege below them? Is this not the white guilt argument?
This is the white savior. Yeah, they're going to do it. Well, one guy's black, but you know what I mean. Yeah, the privileged position to save those less fortunate.
Mm-hmm. God, they sure do turn him into a Christ-like figure. Even on his way down, he's carrying his cross. He's covered in blood. They
even
do
call him
everything
Messiah.
possible
Yeah.
to make it seem like he is taking this upon himself. And then at the very end, what does he do? He sacrifices himself.
Yeah.
For greater good. Yeah. That
All right,
was a
so-
trippy movie.
I have one last question, and I'll direct this to you, Robert, and then we can do our final summary and review or check in on any other notes you guys have. But the question is this: in the point of trying to convince them instead of threatening them, that's sort of arguing for argumentation ethics. While negotiation is preferred and less costly than violence, but sometimes violence still happens. So I wonder if you could take off on that a little bit, because obviously you would prefer not to use violence, because violence is more costly than negotiation, because it could be final if you end up dying as a result of exerting that violence. Can you talk a little bit about negotiation versus imposing violence?
Sure. Yeah. No, they talk to that wise man who's like, no, first you talk to him a little bit, then you bring out the stick. And yeah, that does show Hoppa's argumentation ethics, where you, by even the act of having a dialogue, is showing that you prefer to have a dialogue instead of just going straight to the violence. And you're right. Violence is unpredictable. It's dangerous. It's risky. You could die. You could run into somebody, when you're an athlete, and even if you're at the tippity top, there's always somebody out there in the world who's better than you. You could run in, even if you're like Bruce Lee going into that thing, and I'm just, no worries, I'm going to beat everybody up. You don't know what you're going to go to the next floor down, and you could get bum rush, you get hit in the back, you could just run into somebody who's better than you. So yeah, violence is absolutely a danger, and at least they're doing it themselves. So it's not like they're negotiating, to propositioning the state to do it for them or anything like that.
Yeah, they're not outsourcing the violence by voting or something like that. But this also kind of takes on the Ayn Randian critique of libertarianism, where there's you need a police, a monopoly power in police, because otherwise the competing agencies would go to war with each other, and there'd be a blank out situation. But as you just said, there'd be a higher cost to having violence versus having negotiated agreements ahead of time, or third-party arbitrators who both parties would agree to abide by their decision. And so that kind of overcomes the whole Ayn Randian critique of anarchism.
Absolutely. No, one of your jobs as a human adult is to assess risk and to mitigate risk. And insurance mitigates risk. And insurance companies would definitely prefer arbitration over direct violent action. And so, yeah, there would be all kinds of incentives in place for people to behave in a rational, peaceful manner, because you don't want to just break out the AK-47 and put it on the back of the pickup truck and just go shooting up your neighbors. That's just not going to get you anywhere real quick.
You're saying you don't want
all kinds of retribution.
You don't want to move to Somalia there, Robert?
Somalia sounds like a great place. I'm not going to lie. I mean, but no, I kind of like where I live right now, except for the fact that I got this violent, horrific, tyrannical commissar who thinks he owns me and can tell me what to do.
Yeah, you do have that. So let's get into any final notes? Scott, do you have any other notes? I know that you saw a lot of religious themes in this and some colors that were maybe symbolic of certain things. I know I sent you a picture of Floor 33. 33
Yeah.
can be religious. I think Jesus was 33 when he died.
And he has his revelation with the lady because all of a sudden he takes an interest in trying to get her point across. You know, he starts carrying her message and her burden. So certainly there were religious, and of course, and they keep talking about God. They kept asking about it. And then he turns around and acts on his own like it. But then, yeah, the other stuff I had was like a poor idea of like, and I hate this word, but trickle down economics, you know, where we'll give enough at the very top and eventually it'll trickle its way down and the people will get some at the bottom. And it's just, that was, a lot of it was poorly designed in their attempt to critique economics and capitalism.
Yeah, how many fallacies can they cram into one movie? It seems to be the challenge here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how much we're reading into it and how much the authors intended, but it definitely seems like they're trying to make some economic social commentaries, and it's just all really, really bad. I mean, yeah, if they have to invent this fantastical scenario because they can't show it happening in the real world, they
and there's no chance of
something's
voluntary
amiss.
mobility. Yeah, there's no chance for me to better myself. It's entirely random, and that's so stupid. No, it's not. How many people pick themselves up by their bootstraps and get themselves up to the top because they freaking work for it?
Even in this limited sense of this movie, you know, he does get better at being in this system. He gets more adept at it and more used to it, and he actually does gain some more abilities and some knowledge of how it works. So even within this very confined structure, he still is improving himself and bettering himself and working towards a goal by the end of this movie. So, you know, it's just like you can't shut down an economy even in prison. Apparently you can in the real world just by dictate. But people will still trade cigarettes. They become currency in prisons, and they can't keep drugs out of prisons and all this. And one last comment, and then I'm going to let you finish, Scott. I'm doing my Kanye impersonation. The director says the film's key message is that humanity will have to move towards the fair distribution of wealth with an exploration of the importance of individual initiative in driving political change that critiques both capitalism and socialist systems. It sounds like he's arguing for a third way, a sort of middle of the road approach to the political economy and how things would operate. But as Mises has a wonderful essay called Middle of the Road Leads to Socialism, he argues that communism or socialist structures and capitalism or free market exchange are actually opposing actions and cannot be merged together or work together. And in fact, if you try to impose socialism or socialist policies, or even just price controls or something that, as an example, the problem that they're trying to solve will actually be worsened by it, and there will be further interactions and interventions that they'll try to overcorrect for the previous interaction or intervention, and it moves on towards socialism. So I'll have that on our show notes page as well. It's a really good essay. It debunks the whole concept of there being a third way at all. Granted, we kind of live in a hybrid mixed version of just more and more socialism kind of being imposed, but it's a gradual creep, and I think it actually fits right in line with you're either moving in one direction or the other, and we're definitely moving towards socialism in this country.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Daniel, this is where you help Scott lead in with his final thoughts there.
Oh man, I completely forgot what I was going to say a second ago.
Sorry, man.
No, that's right. It happens.
Yeah, we tend to do that. That's what we do. And we just run our mouths for a while, and we disrupt and interrupt and make our guests forget what they were talking about. Well, Robert, did you have any final notes? Maybe that'll spark Scott's memory a little bit. Will jumpstart his heart.
Well, I can just move into final summary review. I don't have any more notes. You did a really good job getting all those notes together. I don't even know if I saw all those economic fallacies and things. So that was fantastic.
Well, I'll just interrupt for just one moment. if we recorded the show yesterday, I would have none of this. Our original plan was to record this yesterday, and plans fell through. Scott, you were too busy. You were doing a nice
Built a shed for my mama.
Yeah, you helped the old lady cross the street or whatever. Did a good thing. You did your good deed.
Coughed all over her.
But because I had more time to reflect on this, I actually went through my notes again and like expanded on them and kind of developed this kind of, oh, he's talking about Rawls here. He's talking about Galbraith here. He's talking about this over here. And so we have more content for this show because we delayed it by a day. Anyway, Robert, take it away with your final summary review.
Okay, so as I think we've well explained in this review, the social commentary falls well short. I wish more creators were schooled in the Austrian tradition or even the Chicago school or any kind of economics beyond the Keynesian type crap. But I can, as if obviously, like you said, the writers were going for some kind of commentary. I still think you can watch it purely as a psychology type experiment, a character study, and enjoy it. You can watch it and not get any of this economic talk at all. You could also pass right over your head, and I think you can enjoy this quite a bit. If you're an Austrian and you're watching this and you're just like, oh, could it get any dumber? I think you're going to have a far less good time. So this is another one of those like double review episodes, but I'll split the difference here in the middle. I think if you're like you're just like a horror fan, I think you can watch it and enjoy it and it's like a 7.5. But if you're an Austrian, this is like a 3 or a 4. So I'm somewhere in the middle, like a 5.56. It's like around there. I was entertained by it. And I enjoyed the Spanish language, but you know, nobody else is going to be enjoying that. I mean, very few. I can't imagine you're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to dust off my old Spanish skills. But I mean, it's well acted, it's well shot. It looked like it was very inexpensive to make, right? I mean, you just have like the one set, and then you like reshoot it from different angles to make it look like different floors. You change out a few details, but I think it's a cool concept. It was like a one-act play style, like I said in the beginning, and it works as a character study in the depths that someone will go to survive in this hellhole that they either voluntarily put themselves in or were put into. So I enjoyed it, and I'm also glad we tore it the hell apart. So that's that.
Yeah, I think that was appropriate because there was a whole bunch of stuff crammed into this, and it's like. I'll just get into my summary and review here. I think you're right. It is on one level an entertaining movie, a horror genre film that is fun to watch. It'll keep you entertained and keep you interested in watching it and kind of grossed out a little bit. But if you're looking at it from an economic standpoint at all, you're going to just be tripping over all the fallacies all over the place. It's ridiculous. Like they have to construct this entirely like artificial system to even try to make any of it make sense. And so we kind of rip that a bit in this, and we'll have a lot of the resources that you can dig into it further on our show notes page at lastnighters.com/124. And I agree. I think as a film for entertainment value, just for watching it, like watching a Saw movie, if you're into that, if you like those kind of films, you're probably going to think very highly of this. But if you're going to look at it, with a critical eye towards, what kind of social message are they trying to convey, it's going to look like commie propaganda. So it's really hard to give it a score. I mean, I kind of have that split personality idea on it as well. Like as a film, it's pretty good, like a 7 or an 8, but as a social commentary or kind of a reflection on society, I think it's really terrible. I think it's going to give people a really awful message and make them think that socialism is the answer to solve the problems of capitalism when, nothing is capitalistic in this at all. So for that, I would give it like a 2, but kind of settle in on a 5, kind of go in between. What's your take, Scott?
Well, I remembered. Thanks to notes. The comment I was going to make was you were saying how he kind of grows in the story, and there's a hint, obviously, because he's getting an accredited diploma, and he brings a book that he's the intellectual class entering this. And so there's this kind of split between philosophy, and then he's subjected to reality, which is the whole. And you can tell right off the bat there's conflict between what would have been the philosophy and the literature, and then how it actually plays out in reality. It doesn't work. None of it works. Nobody's willing to help each other. They're all greedy and willing to kill each other. But as far as what y'all said, yes. I mean, I've had it going on in the background, but it was muted. And if I'm not having to listen to it and you're just watching the film, yeah, it's a cool film. I don't know if that kind of closeness to the eating human part, that might be a little bit too much for me on wanting to recommend it to anybody, but if that's what you're into, then they'll like it. But yes, I couldn't get over the commentary enough to enjoy the film, because the whole time you're just stuck in an eye roll. Like, oh God, that's not what would happen. That's not how that would play out.
So 94-minute eye roll.
Yeah, if you get
just
stuck in that, like
stuck.
from the get-go, you're just like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not on board for this at all.
There's only 3 classes of people: those above, those below, and those who fall.
Yeah, I could see someone really not liking this movie just from the get-go. Just the premise is dumb and no thank you. But
But I mean, yeah, just with it on mute, I mean, it's a cool film. It's gory, graphic. I guess I do appreciate, if you're going to be graphic, then I would prefer that you're legitimate in your efforts to make it real. But yeah, that's just not that kind of film. I'm not into the graphic horror old school films like that. What is it? 80s heavy metal? Isn't that what they call those films? Heavy metal films? Where it's like super graphic and violent like that? Like Slayer type films. There's a really awesome one.
Grindhouse?
With Nicolas Cage. And I'm going to look up the title of it and send it to you. And if y'all haven't seen that film, that one's nuts. Oh man, that's going to bother me. Y'all talk about it or something, and I'm going to pull it up right now.
Okay. Well, throw out a score for us.
For without commentary on mute, I'll go with a 7 also. But listening to the film, I'm like a 3.
we're all right about the same. It's just the commentary. Just if you can get past it, you can enjoy this film. Otherwise, it's terrible.
All right, we'll split on down all 3 ways here. Well, thank you, Scott, for being our guest for this one. It was a lot of fun, and people can find you at that Facebook page, Silence of the Memes. You got a lot of good memes on there. There's a lot of Biden stuff on there, which I really appreciate. If he makes it through to the election, you'll get a lot of mileage out of all of his guffaws and sniffing of people and other random, weird, creepy things he does. But speaking of shows and episodes that we do, we have a better than zero chance, so better than zero, of Jeff Deist, the president of the Mises Institute, joining us next week to do a Memorial Day episode on Apocalypse Now. Now, just in case it doesn't work out, because it's a little bit iffy, we have a pretty solid plan B guest. So the movie will definitely be Apocalypse Now, and we're going to be doing the theatrical cut. There are 2 director's cuts out, and then there's also a documentary about the making of the film called Hearts of Darkness, which I watched a few months ago, and it's really awesome. But so we're going to be doing the theatrical cut, hopefully with Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute, and if not him, then we'll have another good guest who is familiar with the film and filmmaking and has been on the show before. But I don't want to spoil that until we see you guys next week and let you know where we end up on which guest. But we're going to really need to up our game next week if Mr. Deist is able to join us there, Robert.
That's a hell of a guest.
He's a smart
That's
dude.
awesome. Well done.
Yeah, we'll ask him like 2 questions, and it'll be our hour, because he'll give a 30-minute response on either one, and it'll be amazing. But that's our show tonight. So check it out at lastnight.com/124. Give us a like or subscribe on the old YouTube, and rate us on iTunes and all those good places. And give us some money on Patreon. Check out Robert's artwork and wares available at Trubster.com. And I guess we'll see you guys all next week. And hopefully, Scott, you can stick around for a little bit more with our Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is available for our Patreon supporters. Hit us up at lastnighters.com/Patreon to get a piece of that, and show notes and more at lastnighters.com/124. And you can always find it on the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. And with that, we'll say good night from last night, everyone. Peace out. All right, and I'm going to continue the transmission for just a few more minutes on the Actual Anarchy podcast. We went really long on the last hour's portion of the show, and there's actually more that I wanted to talk about. But Robert, I'm going to throw this one out to you. There is this sort of sacrifice made by the woman who volunteers to go in and do something to help people in the pit because she's dying of cancer and has nothing left to lose. So she tries to do some good in the world. And she ends up hanging herself when she finds that they're on a very low level because she wants to, I guess, provide her body as nourishment for the hero. And I was just wondering what your take on that was, because he had grown accustomed to eating other people, because in an act of self-defense or defense of another, the woman looking for a child ends up killing his first roommate, who tries to kill him or harvest from him.
Yes. What is your question, Daniel?
I guess, well, there's really no moral dilemma, because she's killed herself and offered herself to be sustenance for him, to allow him to live longer. So I guess that solves that problem.
I mean, what would you do? Would you eat it? Yeah, hell yeah, I'd eat her. I want to live. I want to get out of there. I want to seek justice for, the injustice of me being in here, and for all the victims of the people that died. Yeah, I would want to survive and get the hell out of there for sure, if I could.
Yeah, now I still don't see how sending up the panna cotta or even the girl breaks the system or solves the problem or does anything. So
Is that the hopelessness of the world that the author is trying to tell us, that capitalism is just keeping us down and there's nothing we can do except send messages in the form of movies on Netflix?
Deflating ending.
To make money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I thought that the intention was to send that message to show how the system is corrupt and violating its own rules, and so then the legitimacy of that system will become suspect and crumble under the spontaneous solidarity that occurs as people realize that they're not following their own rules and not having people under the age of 16 in there. But
but what would really happen? What would really happen is there are far more crimes that are being that are happening than, we had an underage person in there that survived. Oh well, that's not the straw that's going to break the camel's back. It's like there's all these murders and deaths that are happening, and all these people that are being starved to death. They have way too many entrenched interests to keep anything that happens in there quiet. That they would quickly and easily chuck that little girl back down the hole, or kill her, or whatever. But yeah, I don't think they're changing it because of this little girl. I mean,
yeah, and I think
it's a nice idea, but
we touched on this earlier, where the compartmentalization in this organization is such that whoever is cleaning up after the daily feeding is just going to clean up whatever comes up, and happen to find a girl there. They're just going to okay, there's a girl that we're cleaning off or cleaning up or whatever, like the end.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I guess the idea of the janitor would find the little girl and be like, oh my God, the horror. I didn't know this was happening. like
whole
like you're a soldier that came across Dachau or something, and you're like, oh my god, I what am I a part of? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's why they leave it ambiguous. But I'm sure there's a ton of interpretations out there on the internet, and I guess I'll post one or two of them on our show notes page at actualanarchy.com/181. But anyway, we've been going extra long, extra beefy taste on this one. So Scott, thanks again for being our guest. People can find you at Silence of the Memes on Facebook. You also are a musician and in the great state of Texas, or formerly great state of Texas, about to be great again as they start to reopen. And I saw Governor Abbott pardoned or released from prison the salon owner who defied orders and opened her salon. And the judge told her she was selfish and kiss the boot, kiss the ring, whatever, bow down and say you're
she did now bow before the state.
Yeah, they're opening up just in time for all the Californians to come flooding in.
Oh, I know. It's so bad. Yeah. Hey, this Nicolas Cage movie is called Mandy. Check it out.
Oh yeah, I've heard
You
of
ever
it.
seen that one?
I've heard it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard a lot of good
man.
things.
Okay.
Oh man,
Yeah, we'll check it out.
It is nuts. Yeah, it is nuts. That's what I think they call it. Heavy metal is what the genre of horror film is what they're going for. But it is nuts. Great film, but definitely something to check out.
Okay.
I
Unlike
Googled it up.
the not so great film, The Platform, which we just talked about tonight.
Yeah.
Well, so that's our show tonight, everyone. Check it out. Actualanarchy.com/181. We will see you guys all next week with Apocalypse Now, hopefully with Jeff Deist. And if not, we've got a solid plan B. Much like, I don't know, some college girl.
Plan B,
I'd
the
hate to be
not on
filling
the-
in for
the-
Jeff Dice. That's some big shoes.
Big shoes to fill. All right. Well, peace out, everyone. Check out Kathleen Turner Overdrive right after this, Maximum Freedom.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.